The manga that became a meme even before the first chapter was released was once everywhere. With the extremely oversaturated amount of memes that were coming out, you would think the hype would have died out after the first couple of chapters started to release. But believe it or not, the manga has been very successful even up to this point. And that manga is Kagurabachi. I decided to check out the manga and it's remarkable. I remember just 10 months ago we hyped up this man over just a single spread, saying that this series would be the next best new gen. But now with 44 chapters out, we have a lot of reason to actually believe this. The interesting cast of characters introduced, the MC's goal, the sick power system. You know what? Instead of naming off everything, how about I just break down what I've been enjoying so far from this series. First, I'm going to start with the star of the show, Chihiro Rokuhira. Chihiro is the son of Kunishige, a renowned swordsman known for his unique methods of crafting special swords. He always found his dad's quirky habits a bit odd, but always looked up to him and wanted to be able to follow in his footsteps. But after his father was robbed of his 6 enchanted swords and killed in cold blood, Chihiro had no choice but to follow his new goal of avenging his father's death and retrieving all of these swords.
Okay, so he's an edgy MC who never smiles. What's so interesting?
Well, it's his ideals that he follows which makes him so interesting for me. For one, he actually kills people compared to other new gen shonen MCs. One thing that you'll see a lot in most shonens is they try to find a roundabout way instead of just killing the villain, but Chihiro has no remorse for them. They want to use his father's swords for nothing but greed, but Chihiro does not acknowledge that. He follows his dad's teachings that yes, swords can be used for good, but also for harm in the wrong hands. Katana should be wielded by those dedicated to vanquishing evil and protecting the weak. We need to have accountability and principles, said his father. Which is exactly what Chihiro lives by. He's been tested a couple times throughout the chapters, and he proves again and again that he follows the teachings of his father. Although he appears as a savage killer with only his goal in mind, he's still a kind-hearted human who understands what it means to deal with loss. His relationship with Char is a great example of this. After he discovers the hardship Char went through at such a young age, he showed a more compassionate side that we just have never seen of him unless it was with his father. Which brings me to my next point about why the manga is doing so well, the plot. The series is surprisingly dark for a shonen, especially with the killing methods. The author does a great job of showing how dark the path Chihiro treads due to his father's actions of creating these swords. Beheading people, slicing people in two, slitting their throats, hanging, torture, blowing people up, human experimentation, whatever this was. And this is all within 44 chapters. Give this man more time and who knows what he'll do. One thing that I like is when authors aren't afraid to kill characters. Usually I prefer if they've had more time on screen before killing them off, but it's much more enjoyable when there's actual stakes involved in a series. For example, the Kamunabi, an elite killing force introduced in chapter 11, ganged up with Chihiro to aid in killing Sojo and retrieving one of the enchanted swords. They introduced this colorful cast and made it seem like they'd actually be relevant in the coming story. Just for 4 out of 6 of them to die in a difficult battle they all thought they'd win. And even though 2 survived, it wasn't without cost. They lost limbs in the process. It was a great fight and it seemed like the Kamunabi was going to win, but it showed that the MC's battles are nothing simple. Although yes, it's a revenge story with a edgy MC, the author does things like this to make it different, fresh, and paced well for viewers. Although Chihiro has been everyone's favorite, the cast they've been introducing to the series shouldn't be overlooked. Shiba, an old friend of Chihiro's dad, is basically his right-hand man in the series. He's the funny but mysterious type of side character, as we really know nothing about him and his past. But he always keeps things humorous like Chihiro's dad, and he's pretty strong and can hold himself in battle too. Hiyano, a young woman who owns Cafe Haru Haru, which serves as both a cafe and a way for Hiyano to connect sorcerers, the leader of Yakuza, or big corporations who require their services. Char, like I said earlier, became an orphan after her mother was killed and was on the hunt by the Yakuza for her regenerative powers. But as the story continued, she's been a funny little sidecast to lighten the mood from all the killing. But her relationship with Chihiro is probably my favorite aspect of her, considering that they both grew up to understand each other, since they were both in the same position at one point. Azami, he is one of the highest ranking members of the Kamunabi, a government affiliated organization distinct from civilian sorcerers, dealing primarily with Yakuza and corporations. He reminds me exactly like Nagumo from Sakamoto days. Even the villains they've been introducing, especially in the recent arcs, have been pretty sick. Kiora Sazunami is the 11th and current leader of the Sazunami clan, who have overseen the Rakuzaichi auctions for over 200 years. His character design is top notch and his false love for family was admirable. But I'm going to speak about my favorite so far, Sojo. He is a prominent weapon dealer who controls Japan, a big fish of the underworld. He managed to get a hold of the enchanted blade Cloud Gouger. Sojo actually looked up to Kunishige just like Chihiro, but for different reasons. Chihiro believes that his dad created these swords for good and that killing can only be done for justice. But Sojo believes that swords' only job is for killing and destruction. I was surprised to think that the author would introduce a villain this early with a parallel that rivals the MC, but both his fights with Chihiro were short and sweet. Which transitions me to my next topic, the action/fights. My honest answer for this are, they're clean but kept short and concise, which can be a good and bad thing because we get great action scenes of quick duels or assassinations, but at times they'll trade blows and then run away from the fights. The two longest fights we've gotten that were great are Sojo versus the Kamunabi and Sojo versus Chihiro, which were roughly 5 chapters long and one-sided. Granted, yes, this manga is still new with only 44 chapters. I love the action so far and enjoyed these fights, but we need a bit more meaningful fights that last a bit longer. Both of these fights are, yes, meaningful and great, but I just want a little more like this, just a little longer. This isn't really a complaint, I'm just asking for a bit more struggle when it comes to important figures in fights. They decided to send supposedly the strongest Kabunabi fighter, Hiyuki, to go get Chihiro's sword from him, and they give us this tough looking panel with her flame arm. I'm thinking, okay, blessed, here comes a sick fight. But then they just end up running around each other, chatting a bit and running away. I'm gonna assume they'll have a rematch later, but teasing me like this is not fair. I want a brawl. That's why I read shonen. Giving her this crazy Gojo look in her eye just to tease me? Not fair at all. If you watched my previous Kagurabachi video, you know the two things that intrigued me the most when reading the first chapter was the MC and power system. Surely enough, I was not disappointed. The enchanted blades plus sorcery plus abnormality mix have been perfect. From what I know so far, there are 7 enchanted blades, each possessing a different elemental type attribute. For example, Sojo wielded the Cloud Gouger, where he used cool ice, lightning, and cloud abilities. But because he died, we never got to see anything past those abilities. But with Chihiro and his Enten, we get to see a lot more. Since it's a special blade, it's based on koi fish. My favorite ability is Scatter. It was more or less the way he unlocked the ability, but still, they mention that you are able to uncover more of the blade's power once synergized more with your blade. Chihiro had a flashback of his father and him speaking. Young Chihiro says regardless of his efforts, he could never be who his father is. His dad tells him he's too serious and he needs to be less fixated on life and look more outside the box. Instead of trying to copy who his dad was, try to be different, or else his birth would have been worthless. Right after the flashback, we get his thoughts on how to be more flexible, and then his cool panel of a bunch of fish surrounding the enemy, right before he just easily hacks away at everyone that touches his blade. Now, I think the only thing that I never got used to about these series, and I want to make myself clear, I like the author's art towards fights, paneling, background, etc. But one thing that I've just never gotten used to is the way he draws each character. I don't know if it's just me, but it feels off whenever I look at certain characters. Sojo and Kiora are probably the only exceptions to this, but every other character feels like they just don't look right or not polished enough. I don't know. But overall, the art, action scenes have been fire. This is probably my only quote-unquote complaint with the manga so far. Kagurabachi, with only 44 chapters, has already put on a show for the viewers, and it looks like it's here to stay in Shonen Jump. I didn't really have high expectations after the first chapter, but now I have high hopes for the series. I'm going to continue reading weekly to see where the author plans on taking his series, so expect more Kagurabachi content on the channel. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this type of content, be sure to press the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Comment down below your thoughts on the manga and how it's going so far for you. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.